"This is not America's war," declared Iran's deputy foreign minister in a fiery statement that left officials and commentators around the world reeling. With those bold words, he fired the first shot in what may become the biggest foreign policy dilemma of the current administration. So, why is he so confident that the United States has no stake in this escalating conflict? And why does President Donald Trump now appear ready to decide, within 2 weeks, whether to hurl his nation headlong into the Israel-Iran standoff? Today, we dive deep into the undercurrents of tension, the political maneuverings, and the extraordinary risks that could define the fate of an entire region, and possibly shape history in ways few can foresee. Our focus for this expose is straightforward, yet staggering in its implications. Will the Trump administration truly commit American forces to what outside experts call a potential quagmire, or will it hold back, preferring the unpredictability of strategic ambiguity? In the next few minutes, we will unravel the key developments, examine the secretive negotiations that might be happening behind closed doors, and see how the White House is grappling with intense pressure from various power blocs. We will also weigh the international fallout. Is this conflict destined to upend lives far beyond the Middle East? Stay with us, because the stakes could not be higher. In this riveting story, we have several crucial angles to consider. First, we will explore why President Trump has been so reluctant to reveal any concrete plan, preferring offhanded, even cryptic public remarks. Second, we will shed light on why Iran's leaders believe direct American intervention would spell hell in the region, triggering widespread instability that may echo far beyond any single border. Finally, we will assess the high-stakes game of diplomatic poker being played in Europe, where special envoys hold frantic talks in a bid to avert all-out catastrophe. By the end of this chronicle, you will have a clearer sense of the swirling cross-currents engulfing the White House, the Iranian government, and the broader constellation of global powers trying to keep the peace. Let's begin by rewinding to a crucial moment, the instant when the White House press secretary Karoline Leavitt stepped up to the microphone. With cameras clicking and reporters eager for scoops, she relayed a message from President Trump that sent shockwaves through the briefing room. He intends to make a decision about formal involvement in the Israel-Iran conflict within 2 weeks. That short time frame alone, spelled out in clear terms, was enough to rattle anyone. After all, it is not every day that the occupant of the Oval Office signals the possibility of military intervention on a timeline shorter than the time it takes many people to finalize their summer vacation plans. Leavitt insisted that negotiations with Iran might still happen, and that there is a substantial chance these talks could steady the situation. But the tone in the press room suggested something else entirely, a sense that the administration was on the cusp of a historic gamble, one that might define modern American foreign policy for years to come. She reiterated that President Trump's top priority was to prevent Iran from successfully constructing a nuclear weapon. Yet, as with many events in Washington, the details were vague, and officials were reluctant to address specifics. When pressed about whether Iranian officials might someday appear at the White House, or if Trump himself would seek congressional approval, Leavitt demurred. She offered little more than a now-familiar refrain: no hypotheticals. The uncertainty, of course, only fuels speculation. Might the president favor a targeted strike on Iran's crucial nuclear sites? Is there any space for a drawn-out negotiation that forces Iran to stand down? Or could America opt to stay out of direct involvement altogether? One might be tempted to recall previous administrations that wrestled with high-stakes Middle Eastern policy, but there is an unmistakable new dimension. The White House occupant's approach to foreign policy has always involved unpredictability. "I might do it, I might not do it," the president quipped. Although that phrase can sound dangerously casual, supporters argue that it keeps other nations guessing, and that the president has negotiated significant breakthroughs through similar brinkmanship. Meanwhile, Iran's leadership has remained outspoken. The deputy foreign minister's statement that this conflict does not belong to the United States underscores Tehran's message. If America decides to intervene, it will face a vortex of violent consequences that could ripple across the broader region. As if to reinforce that stance, the Iranian Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei, dismissed Trump's demand for surrender, setting the stage for two leaders with massive political capital at stake, each seemingly determined not to blink first. Amidst all the tension, the intelligence community has found itself squarely in the spotlight. The administration steadfastly insists that Iran is closer than ever to producing a nuclear weapon. President Trump has repeatedly brushed aside intelligence that claims otherwise, including a widely circulated assessment presented by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard earlier in the year. So, the question becomes, who is right, and how will the public ever know? Intelligence matters are, by their very nature, opaque. Yet they form the bedrock of decisions that can send shockwaves around the world. Observers recall the critical intelligence debates that preceded conflicts in previous decades. Now, a new generation of Americans, and indeed the global audience watching from afar, may be on the brink of seeing history repeat. Speaking of the global audience, let us not forget the role of media speculation and the swirl of rumors that nearly always accompany such potential flashpoints. One major publication reported that Trump approved plans to strike Iran, but had not made a final decision to execute them. Another insisted that Trump was determined to hold off, hoping Iran would blink first by abandoning its perceived nuclear ambitions. Add to that the swirl of commentary from allies, experts, and think tanks, and you get a sense of the dizzying environment in which crucial calls might be made. Recently, the president took to his favored social media platform to slam such reporting, claiming no one truly knows his mind. But that cryptic statement only fueled further talk, and the speculation soared higher. You might be asking, where does Israel fit into this puzzle? After all, Israel has already launched strikes on multiple Iranian targets and encountered significant returns of fire. Observers say that Israel's leadership has expressed urgency about eliminating nuclear threats emanating from Iranian sites, including the infamous subterranean facility at Fordo. Nestled in a mountainside, Fordo is believed to be out of reach for all but the most formidable bunker-busting bombs. The talk in some Washington circles is that only the United States has the capabilities to do serious damage on such a heavily fortified site. This tidbit alone has magnified tensions, as controversy swirls around whether the White House might give Israel cover or even outright support for hitting Iranian infrastructure. And if so, might that drag American forces into a direct confrontation? Set against this background is a humanitarian crisis quietly unfolding. According to official reports, Iranian missiles recently hit targets in southern Israel. One such strike landed dangerously close to a hospital, wounding dozens of people, though Iranian state media insists the intended target was a legitimate military installation. Israeli health authorities say many casualties were civilians. On the flip side, Israeli forces continue raiding Iranian facilities, including an inactive nuclear reactor in Iraq, as part of a bid to hamper Iran's nuclear progress. It is indeed a grim mosaic of death and destruction. Israeli officials say at least 24 people have died in their territory since the conflict began, while Iran's last official count from mid-June put its casualties at over 200. Human rights groups monitoring the situation insist the numbers are likely much higher, citing 639 people reportedly killed in Iran since the intense bombardment started. As for the diplomatic front, it is in a frenzy. There are whispers of frantic telephone calls between the American Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. The goal, apparently, is to cobble together a workable arrangement that stops the carnage. European foreign ministers, meanwhile, scramble to broker meetings in Switzerland, hoping cooler heads might prevail if direct talks commence. The stakes with nuclear threats looming are gargantuan. If negotiations fail, the region could be plagued by chaos on a scale not seen in decades. If the White House chooses direct military involvement, it could draw condemnation from those who see the crisis as a local one that the United States is not obligated to solve. We are left with conflicting narratives. The dire warnings of Iranian officials who vow that the conflict could expand and worsen if Americans enter a war they do not belong in, and White House officials who claim they cannot sit idly by while a sworn adversary allegedly approaches nuclear capability. These dueling perspectives collide in a drama playing out in real time. What about the everyday Americans looking on, unsure whether to trust the swirl of rumors, the intelligence briefings, or the president's head-turning announcements on social media? Caroline Leavitt has implored them to trust in President Trump, framing him as a leader with a strong sense of destiny, an unwavering commitment to ensuring Iran never obtains nuclear weapons. But can that trust stand firm when the march toward a potential conflict appears so rapid? Diplomacy watchers point out that there is still time, 2 weeks, as the president says. Some argue that 2 weeks is far too short, that forging a robust diplomatic agreement in that time frame is like trying to write a novel in a single day. Others believe that sometimes all it takes is a phone call or a handshake behind closed doors, and the entire course of events can pivot toward peace. History is littered with surprise breakthroughs. Still, the dark shadow looming over this situation is the rhetorical barbs from both sides, each professing that they will never relent. Before we delve further into this shifting chessboard of alliances and potential missteps, here comes our first short pause for a friendly invitation. If you find the unfolding events as absorbing and consequential as we do, go ahead and share your thoughts or tap that like button to let us know you want more deep dives like this. Your involvement helps us continue exploring the stories shaping our world. All right, returning to our main thread. No party in this standoff appears willing to compromise on the big question of Iran's nuclear ambitions. Iranian officials maintain that their nuclear work is strictly for civilian purposes, pointing to long-standing declarations that they are acting within their rights under international agreements. Yet the credibility of those claims is questioned by governments and analysts from across the globe, who fear that advanced uranium enrichment underscores a hidden desire to build a bomb. Israel, seeing itself under mortal threat, has launched its own campaign of sabotage and targeted strikes, believing the best defense is a swift offense. Meanwhile, critics question whether Israel risks fueling an endless cycle of retaliation. The White House, for its part, attempts to maintain an air of strategic ambiguity, hoping that the unpredictability of not showing one's cards might yield a better deal. The rationale is that if the Iranians are uncertain whether airplanes might roar through their skies, or if crippling sanctions might escalate further, they could be pushed into significant concessions. But how does one measure success in such a game of brinkmanship? Indeed, the very notion of success can be elusive. It could be as ephemeral as holding off yet another conflict, or as tangible as shutting down a nuclear facility for good. Adding to the complex tapestry is the potential for Congress to intervene. Under the American system, the power to declare war rests with the legislative branch. Yet, in modern history, all too often presidents have found ways to engage militarily without explicit declarations. Observers recall a string of authorizations for use of military force, executive orders, and other legal frameworks that have allowed the White House a fair amount of latitude. Is President Trump's statement about deciding within 2 weeks a hint that Congress may soon be called in, or is he prepared to move forward under existing authorities? Analysts in Washington are split. Some believe the president will do everything possible to avoid a full-scale ground engagement, referencing his repeated campaign promises to end forever wars in the Middle East. Others see a hawkish faction in the administration that views direct confrontation with Iran as inevitable, possibly the only way to ensure compliance. The truth might lie somewhere in between, limited strikes on nuclear sites or other strategic assets, combined with robust rhetoric to bring negotiations to a head. Or, as some peace advocates hope, the White House might orchestrate a last-minute diplomatic success, proclaiming victory by forcing international inspectors into Iranian facilities for a fresh round of checks. Of course, looming over all these scenarios is the near certainty that such decisions will spark fierce debate at home. Public sentiment is divided. Some Americans say that continuing the cycle of military engagements in the Middle East benefits only defense contractors and does little to secure peace. Others emphasize that if the Iranian government truly stands on the brink of a nuclear weapon, turning away now would be the height of folly. Then there are the humanitarian voices who warn that any escalation, even if intended to be brief, could spiral into a full-blown catastrophe, displacing civilians and fueling anti-American sentiment. Meanwhile, the press secretary's repeated statement about top priority underscores the administration's laser focus on preventing a nuclear-armed Iran. The White House sees it as a core national security issue, not just a question of Middle Eastern stability. But how to reconcile that stance with the Deputy Foreign Minister's provocative warning about unleashing hell if America crosses a line? These are the kinds of rhetorical escalations that lure even the calmest of observers into adopting a posture of alarm. The impetus to act is clear, but so too is the impetus to remain cautious. We have mentioned the nuclear facility at Fordo, rumored to be built deep within a mountain to protect it from conventional aerial attacks. For Israel, which lacks the specialized super bunker-busting ordnance that only the United States is said to possess, Fordo represents a near-impossible obstacle. That alone may be a reason why Israeli officials, behind closed doors, have pressed the White House to clarify its stance. If the United States refuses to intervene, does Israel attempt a far more dangerous solo mission, possibly with uncertain results? If the White House steps in, does it usher in a massive retaliation from Iranian forces that might threaten American personnel stationed in the region? These are not abstract questions. They have real-world consequences for everyone involved: military personnel, everyday families in Israel and Iran, and the broader international community that relies on Middle Eastern oil and global markets for stability. A sudden conflagration could boil over into other nations, sparking unforeseen crises. Even beyond that, the specter of nuclear confrontation is enough to keep even hardened diplomats awake at night. In all of this, we cannot ignore that President Trump himself is no stranger to a unique brand of showmanship, especially when foreign policy is at the center stage. Some critics accuse him of leveraging potential conflicts to gain political advantage or distract from domestic issues. Others argue that his apparent spontaneity and willingness to break with the norms of previous administrations might lead to positive outcomes unforeseen by traditional diplomacy. The question remains, in 2 weeks' time, or less, will the global community see a diplomatic masterstroke or a meltdown? We should also highlight the swirling churn of commentary from the press. Some outlets claim that the president has already allocated resources for a potential strike on Fordo, pending the final green light. Others say that the administration's main goal is to push Iran into a corner, forcing them to abandon nuclear activities outright. Conflicting reports out of Tehran suggest that some Iranian leaders might be open to reining in nuclear efforts if they can secure guarantees against future Israeli aggression. But these rumors often vanish into the ether as soon as they emerge. European nations, for their part, are scrambling to do crisis management. Foreign ministers from multiple European Union countries have converged in Switzerland, where they are expected to meet with the Iranian foreign minister. These ministers hope to lay the groundwork for an arrangement that addresses Israeli security concerns while preserving Iranian pride, likely through some form of international supervision. Whether or not President Trump wants to give these talks time to flourish remains ambiguous. The White House's position seems to shift day to day. Yes, negotiations are possible, but the clock is ticking, and the armed forces are in a state of readiness. At this moment, it is impossible to say exactly where these chess pieces will land. Each day sees new revelations, an additional missile attack, a sharp exchange of words by officials, or a discreet phone call between envoys. The conflict's volatility lies in the steep mistrust between all parties. Making matters worse, the Israeli and Iranian militaries appear increasingly primed for confrontation, each believing the other side has crossed a point of no return. The United States, with enormous military capabilities and equally tremendous political influence, stands at the center of swirling voices urging caution or decisive action. There is no doubt that the possibility of direct American involvement has riveted attention from global observers. Will the White House truly tie its destiny to this conflict, or will the administration manage a delicate balancing act, armed with threats but holding off on action? The question is pressing, especially given the short timetable the president himself introduced, a determination in under 2 weeks. Even at that time limit, if negotiations fall through and bombs start to drop, the conflict could widen in ways that are almost impossible to foresee. Will alliances shift? Will other actors exploit the chaos? Could the horrors of open warfare overshadow everything else? As we approach the crescendo of this story, here is our second and final friendly pause. If you have found these insights compelling and you are hungry for further breakdowns on crucial global developments, do consider subscribing. We keep watch on events like these around the world, offering context and explanations designed to deepen understanding. And now, let us push past speculation to glimpse the broader ramifications. Every new conflict in the Middle East, especially one potentially involving the United States, can leave an indelible mark on the global stage. Economies far beyond the region might feel the jolt from skyrocketing oil prices, interrupted trade routes, or widespread uncertainty that sends stock markets tumbling. Humanitarian repercussions could be profound as well. Displacement on a massive scale is always a risk. Even a few short weeks of bombing campaigns and missile strikes can unravel communities, intensify suffering, and leave bitter resentments that last for generations. In such circumstances, disinformation and propaganda thrive. Without clarity from the administration and Iranian officials, rumors and half-truths can sow panic. Border countries might feel compelled to ramp up their militaries. Allies of Iran, such as certain armed groups, could see an opening to strike at American or Israeli targets. Meanwhile, adversaries of Iran may seize the moment to pile on pressure. At the heart of it all lies a fundamental puzzle. Is there a diplomatic solution that can freeze, monitor, or altogether curtail Iran's nuclear ambitions without humiliating its leadership? And can Israel and its allies break the cycle of escalation, ensuring that missile attacks and hospital bombings do not become the norm? Some diplomats cling to the prospect of a reimagined agreement, a new version of a nuclear deal that might quell the anxieties of all parties. But such a solution would require enormous trust, and trust has been in painfully short supply. For President Trump, the situation poses the kind of binary political outcome that can redefine a legacy. If he can halt a potential nuclear threat without plunging into a full-scale military conflict, some may praise him as a champion of peace with an edge. If direct intervention sparks a wider war, critics will likely cast him as reckless. That duality hangs in the air. The thought that the next few days could tip the scale one way or the other adds an electric sense of anticipation. Hence, the reason that every corner of American society, even those not typically obsessed with foreign affairs, seems to be talking about the Middle East. Parents, teachers, factory workers, business owners, everyone wants to know, are we on the verge of another prolonged engagement that will siphon resources and cost lives? Or is the administration maneuvering for a remarkable new agreement that might secure de-escalation? The White House efforts to project confidence do little to dispel the unease. Yes, confidence is good, but the repercussions of misguided confidence could be catastrophic. Meanwhile, Iranian leadership is similarly walking a tightrope. Vowing that American involvement would unleash devastation is a serious commitment. If they do not follow through, they risk appearing weak. If they do follow through, the region could descend into something far worse than the tense standoff we see now. Which brings us to the final question. Can cooler heads prevail? Historically, major powers have often stepped back from the brink via behind-the-scenes negotiations that remain unknown to the public until well after the crisis. Perhaps quiet diplomacy is already at work in those Swiss parlors and corridors, with skilled negotiators working day and night to shape a peaceful accord. Then again, cynics argue that it might be too late, that the lines are drawn, the war rhetoric too inflamed. For now, the president's 2-week clock ticks inexorably forward. Ultimately, we have laid out the intricate chessboard of major personalities, conflicting intelligence, and urgent timelines. The White House must break the stalemate or commit to an irreparable course of action. Iran stands its ground, warning that any American deployment will sculpt a legacy of regret. Israel continues its hammer blows on Iranian sites, determined to protect its population from a perceived existential threat. And the rest of the world braces for whatever comes next, hoping that diplomacy or happenstance spares us from the worst-case scenarios. With so many variables in play, ranging from nuclear anxieties to volatile public rhetoric, this confrontation stands as a definitive test of 21st century leadership. Will it end with an uneasy peace or firestorms across the desert? In 2 weeks, we might have a more concrete answer. Until then, all eyes remain on the White House, where the final decision rests. The tension crackles through every corridor, rumor, and briefing. Only time will tell if the United States leaps into the fray or preserves a careful distance, and how that choice will define not only the Trump presidency, but the region's future for years to come.